It was hard for you when Harold passed away.
Like when Harold passed away, that just, it can't help but affect you. You know, I've spent, like, I can't remember how many years it had been since we'd interviewed him, but spent nearly every day at some points just sat with him, listening to him again and going through and editing, and then you find out he's passed away and you're not going to see that final product. And I couldn't go near the doc for a couple of days because it really is quite upsetting. You've weirdly built a relationship with him, and we spent about 4 hours with him. He was a really, really lovely fellow.
Yeah, he was.
You know, when we were doing it, we actually thought we were doing something for the ages.
I thought, why not mix the real world of psychic research and make a good old-fashioned ghost comedy?
I think we fully believed that we were going to carve out a little niche in film history.
And I just got this wonderful shiver down my back that I was about to do something special.
There's nothing else like it. It's funny and fresh.
Welcome to Film Forums. Today I have with me two very special guests, Claire and Anthony Bueno from Bueno Productions, and also my co-host, Juana Rubio. Would you like to introduce yourselves, Claire and Anthony?
Well, I'm Claire Bueno, and I'm the producer of Cleanin Up The Town, Remembering Ghostbusters, and I'm the dear sister of...
me! And I am Anthony Bueno, and I'm the director of Cleanin Up The Town, Remembering Ghostbusters' long-suffering brother.
My first question is about the whole franchise. In your opinion, why you think Ghostbusters became a cultural phenomenon?
Oh, that's a really good question, because that was always the last question that we would ask all the interviewees in the doc. It was always, so why do you think Ghostbusters, at that time, I was like, why do you think Ghostbusters has lasted 20 years? And I think it always comes down to, for Ghostbusters, the one that kicked it all off, it's just a very solid film. You know, it's a classic of the 80s for a good reason, much like Back to the Future and all the rest of them, that they are really good films. They're really solid. You know, everything about that film from one scene to the next works and moves it all on. And it's endured because it's really good. And, you know, stuff like Wizard of Oz and all those and Jaws, they endure because they're just really good films. Once you get past that whole initial buzz and things, it's time that really kind of, you know, and there's many other films that weren't successful at the time, but they went on to be classics after. I think Wizard of Oz was one of them.
Yeah,
so I just think it's always, you know, especially when you get people at a certain age. I was 10 when it first came out. I was a bit older. But it takes, and then, you know, they did the cartoons and then the Ghostbusters 2. And I think for a franchise that really nothing happened after like the early 90s, for probably about 20 years, I think it was. It's still, you know, you go to Comic Cons, people dress up as Ghostbusters, and you're thinking, you know, some of you weren't even born when these films came out, and you're such a big part of your life. So it's fascinating. This is what fascinated us in the first place. So for me, it is just that. It's great fun.
Yeah, but you've got who doesn't love a ghost story? Who doesn't love to laugh? Who, you know, there's romance. You know, there's tech as well, and there's these characters that we all kind of love and kind of invest in because they're all kind of, even though they're quirky, they're just very endearing, aren't they? So I think, you know, with all of that, and it's just good story writing, isn't it? It's as kind of as simple as that.
Yeah. And bendy lasers.
So when the project started and you start doing the research of the documentary, what were the biggest surprises and discoveries that you found?
Oh, I think for us definitely was the ingenuity in the effects. You know, these got, you know, Richard Edlund and his team at Boss Film were literally like creating the machinery to create the special effects, and they would be then liaising with Kodak, going, this is the kind of film stock that we need. There was just innovation and pioneering effects, and I think for us, that was the biggest surprise, wasn't it, really?
Because I was not aware of that. I mean, it's got to come from somewhere, but I know, just one of those things you don't really think about. You don't think of the people who design a computer and all the stuff that goes behind it, but they were just like, and it was all that time, it was all physical and practical. It's not, you know, tapping away. I mean, I play around in After Effects and you come up with some kind of effects I'll add all these together, and sometimes it works and that's what you get.
Whereas I'm exactly the same, with After Effects. Yeah. I kind of dabble around and see what happens. Yeah, absolutely.
It's all a part of the fun of it. But I mean, they kind of do that, but they're like, yeah, designing film stuff, designing lenses and mixing chemicals and what do we get? And it's just, and it blew my mind. And I didn't actually know about Ernie. I didn't know of the amount, you know, I kind of knew what happened with the character, that, you know, the Winston character was in it and then wasn't. And a lot of it was like, oh, it was Bill Murray, not Bill, Eddie Murphy and blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't about any of that at all. And when we sat and spoke with him, it's like, I didn't know to this extent, and like getting the first-hand knowledge of what actually happened at that time. So there was always something that kind of comes, which is the whole point, you know, there's, you know, it's like anything really that, you know, even if you see a live show of a comedian, say, there's the jokes that you want to hear and there's the jokes that you actually have never heard. And it's kind of like that. You want to kind of hear some of those stories that you've already heard, but you also want to try and hopefully peel back other layers to it. And that this was the whole point of the film.
And that's, I mean, that's, you know Ghostbusters inside out because it's, you know, you've been such a huge fan since you were a child. So we had a skeleton, I mean, you know, of a script that we wanted, but, you know, with documentary filmmaking, you also have to allow yourself to be organic and allow yourself to learn and then be open to all the new things and new threads to help kind of make this story kind of more alive, really, isn't it?
Exactly,
Yeah, I feel the thing I really love about your documentary was that creative process that you show along the way, that the whole thing was made in the process. You know, they have the script, but they don't have anything, how to do the ghosts, how to do the puppets, anything. So that was very, very interesting and amazing. So now we talk about the crowdfunding process. What was the best and the worst of that experience?
You got to have a bit of a thick skin, which I don't really know we have. So I mean, I'd say 90-95% of crowdfunding is great, and obviously you do it because you need the money, and we did need the money at the time. But it's very difficult because you tell people through the crowdfunder, this is what we're intending, it'll be finished by this time, and blah 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 blah, and you'll get all this stuff, and then but you get to that time and you just everything went completely out the window. I mean, we suffered a lot through Brexit, because when we were trying to get the film finished, Brexit just kind of happened and we were out in the States, and it absorbed so much of the funds.
Yeah, because the pound dropped, so
everything cost like twice as much as like, we didn't budget for this. So it was, I mean, for the most part, it's fine. It's a full-time job. I mean, you mainly dealt with it.
I was like a machine, wasn't I? Though I am a bit of a machine.
Yeah.
I don't have an off switch when there's work to do. I've learned that. I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse or a good thing or a bad thing, but it was literally once you start the crowdfunding, you've got to continuously work at it and keep social mediaing. And on social media, I have a love-hate relationship with. I think the great thing about crowdfunding is that it brought a community together, and and having all that support and including everybody else, whereas it was kind of a solitary process for you and I, wasn't it? It was really good. However, the problem with crowdfunding is if we had a private investor invest in the film, we would only have to answer to one person. If there's a delay, we had to answer to whoever just wanted to berate us, in a public forum, without knowing half the amount of stuff that was going on, because you just can't share. There's private things that were going on. There was
legally
legal stuff that we just couldn't talk about. And also people that are investing into this crowdfunder, is that they're not filmmakers, and it was our first film, so we were learning as we were going along as well. I mean, the one thing that we learned, and I hope that we did as well as we possibly could, was that we just kept people informed, and by interacting and just being as transparent as we possibly could, was helpful. But you can't please everybody, so you're going to get slagged off no matter what you do. So it was very difficult.
I mean, 95% were fine and really supportive and really helpful.
I was thinking whilst you're talking, like, maybe I should have done my research better, because I didn't actually realize this is your first film, and that absolutely blows me away. You've managed to produce this as your debut feature, I guess, narrative, the documentary feature, sorry. So wow, That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's very true.
I mean, we obviously worked on other things for other people and stuff, but this was, our first that we was like, no, we're going to do this one. We worked on one on American Wealth in London. I edited and did all the cam work on that one. And that kind of gave us that kind of opening of like, okay, these documentaries, I didn't, even when we were doing the werewolf thing, I thought, I didn't quite see the point. There was already a Blu-ray, there was already a DVD out with some extra features. Like, why are we doing a documentary? And then it's like, I see, where that was going. And it's like, yeah, there's nothing like that on Ghostbusters. And Ghostbusters was my favorite film. And because of Claire's skill set and my skill sets, and they complement each other rather than sort of like compete against each other. Yeah. So it was just like, let's give it a whirl. And that was basically it. It's just a great excuse to watch loads of other films and documentaries and go, what are they doing? And how are they doing that? And it was always like trying to just make the best film that we could, really. Yeah. And that was always been like the heart of it. And try not to make any kind of sacrifice just for the good of, well, this will help it sell better, or this is sort of like, oh, this is what these other people want over here, and the one fight was to keep it to the length that it is, which is 2 hours, and but you put it in front of anyone with distributors, things like that, and instantly, without even seeing the film, well, it's got to be 90 minutes. It's like, well, no, but if it doesn't work at 90 minutes, but it worked at 2 hours, then it stays at 2 hours. That
leads me in very nicely, actually, into my first question, really. You got this fantastic booklet that you sent me along with the sort of Blu-ray, which I obviously watched. And you described the documentary as originally being cut down to 5 hours, and then down to 2 hours, as you've just alluded to. Can you talk us through the sort of the editing and decision-making process? So who has final say in terms of what is cut, and were there sort of major disagreements? How long did it take? Because that sounds like a mammoth task.
It really was. It was, I can't remember how many hours. Originally the film was going to be about both films. So I like the logo as like the Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters II logo on it, which in the end, even though we knew the film was going to be, that we were going to break them up, it's just a part of the branding, and it just made sense that we kept it on it. And that logo looks really good. Like Anthony's art is amazing. Always loved it.
Art director.
So it was very much like I say it was 40. I think it was 40 odd hours worth of content, and then you kind of like just pare that down into its kind of, okay, these are the interviews, and this is how we structured the interview. So we'll bundle them all together, and I'll kind of intercut it so it makes more sense. And really, like the original 5 hour one, it's a lot of duplicate information and things like that. So when we did the second pass, that straight away came down to like 4 hours, I think, and then down to about 3.5. But it was difficult getting it down to even the 2 hours. And there is a 100-minute version, which was purely for like when we do cinema screenings and things like that, just to make it a bit easier and broadcast. That sounds a bit poncy, but you just got to feel it. And when the beats are working, and there are certain times when you have to be brutal and think, well, there's 2 bits that I wanted to put in the doc, but I was always adamant, we both were, that everyone we interviewed appears in the film. So there's no one that was kind of left out, oh, we haven't got time for them or anything like that. It's like everyone has to be in it. It was always a thing. So when we were talking about Gozer, we weren't able to interview the actress that played Gozer. So it was just like, it's only a couple of minutes, but it's a couple of minutes we need to take away, because every second was literally counted at that point. So there was Gozer, and there was the containment unit and scene inside the containment unit. And it was really, okay, if we're going to get rid of that little bit of the sequence, this other bit doesn't make any sense. So in some respects, it's just editing. It's just some things made sense when you remove them. Other things were a lot harder to do. And it's just that having to watch it over and over, or you edit it and then you walk away from it and you go back after about a week, and then you rewatch it again. And you just get that kind of feeling of like, I really like it. It's a great bit, but it just doesn't make any. And that's why I bunged as many as I could on the Blu-ray, because you get to a point where it feels like the film's starting to drag down, or there's too much information, and it is really, somebody says, what's the phrase, kill your darlings or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And it is really hard, especially when you like everyone that you've interviewed, and some were just amazing and constantly pouring out information, and Harold Ramis and Richard and Terry and Richard Edlund and Terry Windell, kind of listen to them and you just want to sit and listen to them. You don't want to cut off to something else. You just want to listen to what they're saying, because everything that they say is just a gem, and it's just always engrossing.
Are we right in thinking there's going to be a second part or a second documentary that focuses on Ghostbusters 2, and some of those interviews kind of going to move into that part because they didn't? Okay, right, okay.
That was it. I mean, I didn't want to make a doc that was going to be like an hour on, so it was going to be a 90-minute film, and I didn't want to have like an hour on Ghostbusters and then just 30 minutes on Ghostbusters 2, because part of the reason when we started all of this was there was nothing on Ghostbusters 2 at that point. It was just such a limited amount of information, and there still isn't a lot now, but there's more than there used to be, especially when we first started, which was a long time ago. So it was just, I wanted to give Ghostbusters 2 its due deserts, because it's a really interesting film, and the whole process of how that got made is really interesting. So it just became a really easy decision in the end. It was either going to be a 4-hour film, which I wanted to avoid doing, and then it was just like you just sit and you discuss it, and it's like, yeah, that's what we're going to do. So it's split it up. It's going to be called Too Hot to Handle: Remembering Ghostbusters 2, and we're just editing it all together now.
Did you find any difference between the production of the first part and the second part?
Oh yeah, huge.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. It's really interesting, and I think Ghostbusters came around at a time when everyone's careers just come together exactly the right point.
Yeah, they just aligned, didn't they?
Yeah. And it elevated everyone to a different kind of level, and Ghostbusters is what it is. But Ghostbusters 2, it's weird because like now, 5 years, sometimes you wait 5 years for a Bond film most of the time, not always due to pandemics either. And so I just find it's like back then it seemed like an eternity waiting for Ghostbusters 2. But it is a very different kind of process that they went through. And mainly, I would say from my observations, it was you have the success of one film. It's a bit like when you do any job. I always do this. The first time you do a job, you're super attentive. And then when you do it again, you're thinking you're so much more complacent. You think, this piece of cake, I've already done one. And that's when everything goes wrong. And I always find Ghostbusters 2 kind of went that way a bit. And I love Ghostbusters 2, don't get me wrong. I'm very fond of it. But you can see, and you'll see through the interviews, that there was a certain case of, okay, well, we're making this film, and now, we'll just go straight and we'll do Ghostbusters 2 while we're finishing that one. And they were doing so much at one time rather than just focusing on just the one film being Ghostbusters 2. And they wanted, I can't remember why they needed it out. I've got a feeling Columbia wanted it. There was a change in the guard at Columbia, and they wanted that made and out as soon as possible.
What we're very mindful of, obviously, is that there is the same amount of love that goes into Too Hot to Handle, as well as as Cleanin Up The Town. But interesting, our motion graphics editor, Derek Osborne, his favorite is Ghostbusters 2.
I mean, I'm only kind of starting out in motion graphics myself. I enjoy it, but I'll never get to that level. I've got too many other things I'm concentrating on. But I was so impressed with it that it was so slick. It was sympathetic to the film's branding and the period. What I wanted to ask about that is that, did he get much of a brief beforehand in terms of was there a brief beforehand, or was it a collaborative approach? Or did you just say, look, you love Ghostbusters, you understand the branding, get on with it? How did it work in terms of the process for applying the motion graphics and the titles, etc., to what you had filmed?
It was both, you kind of give him a lowdown on what he likes, but it was also he knew. And we knew, because he was originally. In fairness,
he was our archive producer.
Exactly, yeah.
That's what he came on and hit, because he's a massive collector. So we were already working with him, and he was providing us materials, wasn't it? That's how it kind of started.
Yeah, and we there was somebody else before Derek, and he couldn't continue. So and we were just, and there was elements that was just like they owned very impressive stuff, but it was just like didn't feel quite right either. When we knew when the whole film got done, we'd need to change things. But Derek just got it. And he said, I can't remember what he did originally. He'd sent a few things over, and he's just like, you just nailed it.
Yeah.
And it's just, even to like not getting the photos and cleaning them all up and making them look pristine, but still leaving some of the distress and hairs. He said, you want it to feel like, you're all sat around and you're all getting the box of photos out and you're handing them around. That's the feeling. You want to feel like you're in the room with these people going through all this stuff. and it was always that you want to make it of the period. I mean, I had very fancy ideas. I want to shoot it on like 16mm or 35. We're going to shoot it like this. It's all going to be practical. But that whole intro sequence is going to be entirely, and a lot of it is actually practical.
That intro is practical.
Like all the containment unit and things, we shot that. We were out in the States, and we knew some people that had one that they were building and it weren't finished. We were going to build one ourselves and we couldn't because it was way too expensive. So we shot it all, but it was really raw. It was only like MDF, I think.
Yeah.
But I was like, the raw footage is interesting to see. Like a friend of ours, Sam Ciccarello, plays called Hollywood Expendables in Burbank. It's got this little space, and we shot it all there. And then when we got it, and it's like we'll need to do some CG on it. There's no getting around it. But most of it is just like the smoke coming out of it was in our kitchen in London. And Claire's on the floor. I think there's a photo of it in the back of the end of the doc. Claire's on the floor, wrapped in black. And we learned a lot from the doc. She's like, okay, we shoot all this in black and I'll film this. And there's like a shoebox, an old smoke machine that we had to jerry rig because it was long since knackered. So there's another friend of ours, Luis, and he came and he was like pumping that. And we had the light, and there's a black shoebox, black card, black wrap, and Claire wrapped in black. We're doing that, and then you just kind of remove that. I can't think how you do it. I can't think of the filter within After Effects screen. I think it is. Whatever. Anyway, it removes the black and double exposure basically, and then overlay that over the top of the light and all those kind of light lens flares. They were all the ones that we got from the camera. So there was a huge amount there that was actually practical, and then a few things done in Photoshop and stuff, like all the containment unit things. And then but it was just. It's lots of playing around, over the years. You have lots of ideas, and I wanted to do everything projected onto a cityscape, and that we kind of did that a little bit. That was all, like, again, when you've seen the camera go backwards and forwards, that's all projected. We just tarted it up with a bit of neon within After Effects and stuff. But there's a lot there that we did do.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to use the principles of actually what we learned from Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2 interviews was that, effects are great, but you use them when they're needed to serve the story. They're not there to replace a story. And for us, Cleanin Up The Town and Too Hot to Handle will always be about the people. I mean, ultimately, the reason why people are loving this is because the way you have edited it and the way that Derek has worked with the visuals is that you're telling a story of people. Yeah. And for you, it was always very important, just leaving those little laughs at the end and these breaths, and you get, the sort of the pathos and just see the personalities. That was so important for us. This is about the people who made the film as much as it is about the making of a movie that everyone loves. Yeah.
I'm curious to know the equipment that you use for the documentary. Which camera did you use, and what the software for editing?
Our baby was the Z1, wasn't it?
The
original was the Sony Z1.
Yeah. Tape. HDV. Yeah. Which really, once you de-interlaced it to give it a filmy look, really gave it quite a nice texture. I mean, it's not an amazing camera, and you have to tweak it, brighter and all that kind of stuff in the edit and make them saturate the colors. But it just, it was a great little camera. I mean, the Firewire port blew on it, and it was actually, we had to buy a new one. It was when the tsunami happened in Japan, and you couldn't get tape. Like you normally just walk into whatever store and say, a box of those or whatever. You couldn't. It was just like you'd come down to, you'd see a pile of 5 tapes. It's like, we've got 3 events coming up. That's not going to cut the mustard. Yeah. So we were forced to a situation where we had to buy a new one, and that was the Canon XF305, which we still use now. Yeah. And the only fantastic camera. It has been great. I mean, the only downside, it's not 4K. And because it's that thing. I remember somebody was giving his critique on the film, saying, shame we got 2 camera setups and stuff like that. And some of those things are very nice. And making things up more filmy and depth of field and all that I do like all that kind of stuff. But again, it comes down to the human interest stories. It's like and sometimes those edit points, having 2 cameras, you can cut out an and an R just by flicking between the 2 angles. But I don't know, there is also something about just having that one camera, just as you are sat there in front of someone. Yeah.
It feels very intimate.
So that's what the cameras were. Like the lights were dado light. I mean, we used to take all this over with us.
It was just us two, though, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah. We had to. There was this one. I think it was the first time we did a big trip, wasn't it? It was like we were over.
I don't know. I'm not sure of the story you're going to tell.
The cab story.
Oh.
So
oh, yes, this is in the booklet. I found it was interesting that the amount of time that you gave to that in the booklet, but actually it was really interesting to read. Yeah. please go ahead. Yeah.
So we'd gone over, I think it was when we'd gone over for a month. And we'd done it a couple of times. It was the first time I think we were able to do it. And it's when we'd interviewed Harold and Sigourney Weaver and all those.
Yeah.
And we'd done like 3 weeks in LA, and then we'd flown to New York which was going to be Harold and Sigourney. He could only do Chicago. So we had to fly to New York and then get straight on another plane, go to Chicago, interview Harold, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And then fly back we stayed the night and then flew back the following day to interview Sigourney later that evening.
Yeah.
Flights were delayed.
Oh,
it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And then then you're flying around in the air, you get hovering. It's like, why are we landed? Like, we're still in the air, and they just, they circle. It's just, they're just waiting for space. It's like, we should be there by now. So we land, phone them straight away. Don't worry, this happens all the time. Totally understand. Don't worry about it. Great. Get to the cab line. The one fella wouldn't take us because we, I mean, it was just us, and we learned how to, put it all in our suitcase and put it down. But at the time I'd get it all out if it weren't packed away. But like a big bag and the dado light, you've got the camera bag, and you've got this, and you've got luggage, and it's a lot. And then so the one fellow wouldn't take us. The other fellow who had like a little SUV was like, too many bags. You've too many bags. It's like, I know that. We're the ones carrying it. I didn't say that to him because he was already quite irate by that point. And we get it in. And he's just like, and going around the freeway, wherever it was, getting us from where it was, whatever airport we flew into.
Was it LaGuardia?
Might have been, onto Manhattan Island. Stops. Doesn't like pull over. He stops in the middle lane on the freeway. You too many bags, and he jumps back out of the car, goes and slams the boot again. Too many bags, and all he was rude and hostile the whole journey.
Yeah, he was.
So we pull up outside the hotel, and I'm like, we do not tip him. And I was getting out to help the Claire to deal with it. There's the money person, the producer.
he buggered off.
I had to help.
We're not tipping him off. Oh, Muggins had to deal with him.
So she did. So I was there with the concierge, and we're getting the bags out and stuff. And the fella sees that he hasn't got a tip. He goes, "What? No a tip!" And there's like the perspex. Like, bang, 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 no a tip. And it's like
this old lady comes to the car, sees him banging on the perspex, goes, "Oh!" shuts the door and goes.
He went nuts, and it was just guys, you have been rude. And the fella's like, calm down, all right. And it's like the doorman like, you got to calm down. Well, you won't be like this if I acted like you. I wouldn't be surprised if I don't get a tip. Oh, and then he drove off. It's like, there we go. And we had like 20 minutes before Sigourney Weaver was supposed to turn up. And that was a whole of the ordeal afterwards. But that was
she wasn't an ordeal. She was lovely.
Amazing.
She was amazing.
The whole kind of turning up and getting in the room, and then you got lost in the hotel. And Sigourney was there. We were all ready to go. She's like, is she okay? Maybe she's got lost in the hotel. It's happened to me a few times. Like, yeah, possibly.
He's just got a lot of money.
Oh my God, am I going to have another John Candy conversation?
There's no life like making movies.
What people don't realise, before we did the Kickstarter, we were completely self-funding this film. We literally would work, save our money, and then spend it. We didn't go on holidays. We plowed all our money into making this film. So there was so much, there's so much going on.
Do you think if you'd known, I'm sure a lot of people will ask you this or have asked you this, but do you think if you'd known what was going to transpire in terms of the years it was going to take, because I think you thought it was going to take you sort of maybe a couple of years,
and
you admit that obviously wasn't realistic, and then it's taken you more than a decade to really put it together. If you'd known that when you started, do you think you would have gone for it, or do you think you would have thought twice?
I think we're quite belligerent and bloody minded, aren't we? And I think we're eternal optimists.
I mean, it's if somebody said it's going to take you 12 years, you would probably sit and think, but there's a lot more to it than that. I mean, there has been some extremely stressful times to deal with, mainly certainly the latter half, in the cold kind of distribution kind of like side of it. It got
the business side of it.
That like just finishing the film off. There's you know, there's levels of filmmaking. We were talking about this earlier about when you make anything, you know, there's people that make shorts, there's people that just work on TV, and there's behind the camera, in front of, and all that. And they all have varying levels of complexities to them. And us doing the doc, you know, when it's just, you know, me and thee, and it's like, yeah, I'll edit while I haven't really got any other thing else going on. And you sit down when you can to do this thing. And it isn't always, you know, if you can't get in that headspace, that can get really hard.
Well, it was hard for you when Harold passed away.
Like when Harold passed away, that just, it can't help but affect you. You know, I've spent, like, I can't remember how many years it had been since we'd interviewed him, but I spent nearly every day at some points just sat with him, listening to him again and going through and editing. And then you find out he's passed away and he's not going to see that final product. And I couldn't go near the doc for a couple of days because it really is quite upsetting. You've weirdly built a relationship with him. And we spent about 4 hours with him. He was a really, really lovely fella.
Yeah, it was lovely.
And you do all of that, and it's hard, but when you finish it and then you start, you know, we'll distribute it now, it's done, nothing else done, I can grade, I can do, it's all done. But then you talk to professional people, and they're like, well, have you done this, and that? And they talk about online and offline and stuff, which I kind of knew what on and offline editing was, but I knew but didn't know. But then you need to know what online and offline and the differences between the two, and conforming.
Conforming so that it's legally you're able to broadcast it. You know, there's all a whole QC, you know, quality control, and it has to pass all of these checks before you can broadcast it to the public.
For those people who don't know what offline and online editing is, would you be able to explain that in maybe like a minute, like for people who don't know?
So online and offline is, so basically if you're a offline editor, that's you're editing it. You edit the film and you chop it all together and do all that.
And you're not working with the kind of the raw kind of high resolution files.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I think it's changed a lot over the years. It's sort of like, certainly in the years of in the old days, like if you're working with 35mm, then they even put it down to tape, I think, and you kind of edit with that. And then when you know the cuts and the bits you're going to use, then you get all the full stuff, and then you use the negative and you chop it. And as you went into HD, I always edited in full res anyway, so I just thought, I'm doing the online as well, I'm also doing the offline. But when you finally figure all that kind of stuff out, so you can work with that, and you've got machines powerful enough to edit. If you've shot in 4K, you could edit it in 4K. But it's also making sure that film, every frame is the same frame rate, because the one thing with the doc was even though all the interviews were shot in the same frame rate, a lot of the motion graphics weren't. And some of those are purely graphical, and you just go in After Effects, you change the frame rate, you render it out again, and all's good. Other things weren't quite so simple. And then you just got to basically sit there and make sure that film and everything is conformed. It's all in whatever resolution it's going to be. It's going to be that version that gets sent and then goes out to the world. So it's not going to be a standard definition version or a HD version. It's going to be the full 4K. Everything's got to conform to being exactly the same frame rate. I mean, on film it's different because you're probably going to shoot it all in the same frame rate anyway. And because if everything isn't in the same frame rate, you will get problems. When you're editing, the computer just deals with it. I didn't see the difference, but when you see it on a big screen and you see something that isn't, you see the differences. So all of a sudden that online becomes a really important part. So it's conforming and online. It's just really, it's making sure that everything's legal, it's gone through the grade. And I think in a lot of cases, like the grade and the online, and that person that you take it to, they'll do everything that's their job. They do, because it's their job to make sure they deliver that film. The picture anyway, not the sound, but the picture is all in exactly where it needs to be. Everything's within its legal parameters, like brightness and darkness wise and colors and things. And it is quite a process. We went through a lot of highs and lows with that. And I learned a load. Yeah. But but you just get, when you're doing your own thing, and especially these days when you're locked in your own room, you're doing your own thing, and that's it.
What one piece of advice would you give to aspiring documentary filmmakers that perhaps you wish you'd been given when you started out? So that's to both of you.
You can't set yourself a time, you can't say, I'm going to make this film in 2 years, and if you haven't done it, then forget about it. Once you commit to doing it, you have to be committed to the project and you have to see it through to the end.
Yeah.
I think it's very hard to keep forging forward and pushing forward. So I think definitely if you make the decision to make to make whatever film, you need to commit and go, right, okay, I'm going to see it to the end, and don't give up.
And it's like anything within this industry is that, you know, whether it's like presenting or acting and things like that, if you're going to say, I'm going to give it a year, forget it. Don't waste your time, because, you know, yes, there are people that get to where they want to get within the year. It does happen, but it's, you know, you don't know about all the failures. You always hear about the success stories. You never hear people say, well, yeah, I'll give it a try. It was a complete waste of time. I don't know why I bothered. It's always, well, somebody picked me out of the crowd, or da-da-da. They're all lovely stories, and they do happen. But you've got to take it into account. There are thousands of people out there trying to do that.
Yeah.
And it is, everything is really hard work, but you're doing something you really enjoy. So it's hard, but you get a lot of satisfaction from it. And
the other thing I think as well is having a great team of people.
Yeah.
Particularly like with documentary, where there isn't a lot of money. So, you know, really a big part of everybody that's worked with us have contributed because they wanted to be a part of the project.
Yeah.
And so I think having that team around you who are prepared to commit and be with you and go on that journey with you and collaborate. I think for you, you know, if I may say, Anthony, what makes you a great director is that you have a very clear vision, but you're a collaborator and you want to hear, you know, the team's views, and you take everything on board and you listen, and then, you know, you apply what you think was right for the film and you have the final say, but you do work as a team. And I think everybody, I'd like to think that everybody that's worked within the film for us have all been able to add their creativity, and they've all got their stamp on the film.
Yeah, it is. It's sort of like, I'd like someone right at the beginning to say, right, the difference between frame rates, this is why.
Yeah.
I knew the frame rates, but I didn't know the problems they would cause. But yeah, no, because it's and life is a thing like that, really.
Yeah,
you just get through. It's like they say, get used to disappointment and blah blah blah, and that comes in many guises and takes many shapes and forms, and that is something that, you know, it'd be nice somebody to sort of like said that it doesn't matter how hard you work, how long you work at things, and how experienced you get, you will still make those failings. You know, there's big filmmakers now that are still making those kind of like, you know, they'll make a massive success and they'll make a massive flop at the same time. It's just the nature of it, and you don't know what each one's going to be. You just try your hardest, and that, because there was sometimes when you go to work with people and something happens and it doesn't quite work out, and you think, why didn't I figure that out in the first place? But it is what it is. Such is life, you know, and you just got to plow through it. You just, you know, always just, if you are going to do it because you really care about it, because you're going to spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
And if you don't care about it, you're setting yourself up for a fall. And and I've done some of those things before, and it becomes quite unpleasant. But you know, it is what it is.
I want to really, really thank you for coming on board as a co-host. I know you jumped at the chance. I offered this out to the whole team, and I had about 4 or 5 people in our team say yes, but Juana shouted the loudest. So
no, thank you both for you.
Oh, my teacher, I don't know if you.
I know, it's very nice too. I was going to put a Cleanin Up The Town one on. I thought, no, I can't do that.
I did that.
Yeah, just
shameless advertising.
Finish off by saying how much I thoroughly enjoyed the documentary. I watched a documentary on Netflix recently, a documentary series, one of which was Ghostbusters, which was very, very good. This is on a par and better, in my opinion. And now that I know the amount of the blood, sweat, and tears and years that went into it, it just makes me enjoy it even more. And I'm certainly going to watch it again. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, agreeing to this interview, and I'm really looking forward to this coming out.
Thank you for reaching out and inviting us and just giving us your time, both of you, because we just want the film to succeed, and we just want people to see it and love it.